Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wal aqibatu lil muttaqeen wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin wa ashabihi ajma'in amma ba'd fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim bismillahir rahmanir rahim wa aqimus salata wa atuz zakata warka'u ma'ar raki'in فقال الله عز وجل في القرآن وقال الله عز وجل خذ من أموالهم وصدقة تطهرهم وتزكيهم بها وسل عليهم إن صلاتك سكن لهم والله سميع عليم فقال الله عز وجل في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد وقال الله عز وجل في شأن حبيبه مخبرا وآمرا إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وصلي عليه. My respected audience, my brothers and sisters, elders, children, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. All praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the universes, who blessed us with the gift of His beloved and our master Muhammad Arabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And after durood and salutations upon that beloved master, we are gathered here to understand the masla of zakat a little bit better. This is being streamed live on a few different platforms at the minute, so if the angles aren't great from whatever platform you're watching on, it's because there's I've got about a number of different devices all pointing at me at the minute, and so it's difficult to get them all right. In terms of questions, questions for those who are watching on Facebook, you can post the questions on Facebook, and they'll come up on the screen. I'll endeavor to answer them. Those who are joining via Zoom, if you put the questions on the Zoom chat, and I'll endeavor to answer the questions. Inshallah ta'ala, I think I'm going to cover most of the issues which are generally asked, but that doesn't mean that it's an all-exhaustive session which will cover all of your questions, but I'll endeavor to cover a lot of the questions that I normally get asked, so that, and then if there's anything else, you can feel free to answer the questions as we go along. So first of all, we understand that zakat is farz upon us. It is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It is one of our farzi ibadat. And when does it become farz upon us? It becomes farz upon us, number one, when we are in sound state of mind. In other words, we are aqil, we are baligh, we have reached the age of puberty, we are Muslims in Islam, and probably all of those are kind of given factors, I suppose. But the main one is when we reach the amount of wealth in ownership which constitutes nisab. So that's the first thing that I'll define, is what is nisab, who must pay zakat, okay? Who must pay zakat? Because there's two aspects to zakat. Number one is who pays zakat and how much do you pay? What do you pay it on? And then the second part of the issue of zakat is around who is eligible to receive zakat. Okay, so these are important concepts that we need to understand. So first of all, Allah has told us in the Quran that amongst خُذُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ صَدَقَةً تُطَهِّرُهُمْ وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ, from your mal, from your wealth, give a sadaqah, give a portion in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? تَطَهِّرُهُمْ وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ, so that it can purify you and your wealth. So the concept of taking zakat from our wealth and paying it, it is to fulfill our obligation and farz to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But why is that the case? Does Allah need our mal? Can Allah not give wealth to the poor, the needy, if He wants? Of course He can. Allah is Allah, He can do anything He like. He says kun fayakun, be, and it is. So the reason is that it's training, it's as man, it's our worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we, you see, man's nature is that he's very greedy when it comes to his wealth. And it's probably the most difficult thing to give. A man will give his time, man will give his, many different things that he owns, he'll sacrifice. But when it comes to his wealth, there's people who would rather sacrifice their own children than sacrifice their wealth. So giving this concept of isar and qurbani and giving in the way of Allah is important. So Allah says, give your wealth in the way of Allah. But why? Number one, he wants to see our sacrifice, but number two, so that it purifies us and our wealth. So in order to purify ourselves and our wealth, it is a must that we give this zakat. And the other thing is, when we give zakat, we think that we are taking out of our pockets, we are giving, and therefore we will be left with less. That's not the case. What you will find is, if you do not pay your zakat, there will be less barakah in your money. You will have monetary problems. You will have financial issues. Money will, you might get robbed, something might get stolen. All of these problems start to occur. But when you pay your zakat and you pay properly, there is barakah in your income. You will find that your money takes you further, even though in terms of monetary or wealth purposes, you feel that you may have less. In actual real terms, in spending power, Allah will give you more. You will get more for your money if you make sure that you give your zakat. So it's important that we do that. And there's various promises of Allah in the Quran about how He gives 700 times and 10 times and so on and so forth. But be sure that you will receive much more than you have given. So, what I always say is, what's the quickest way to get rich? If you want to... if you're having financial issues, if you're having problems with wealth and with finances, the easiest way to make money is to give money in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever you have, give it, and Allah will give you more. And there's a beautiful riwayat on this from the ummati of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, where Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he was walking one day and he saw this fakir, and this fakir approached him and said, "Oh Musa, I'm a fakir, I have nothing to eat for days and days. I implore you, make dua to Allah, ask Allah to give me my rizq, that whatever was planned, whatever He had planned for me to give me in the rest of my life, the duration of my life, whether I'm to live 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, whatever was planned during that time, for Allah had planned to give me, if Allah gives me in one go, make this dua to Allah." Musa alayhi salatu wasalam raised his hands, he made this dua, Allah gave him, accepted the dua and gave the man the rizq that had been scheduled for him during the course of his life. Allah gave him in one go. This ummati of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he took that money and he went about his business. Some years later, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam was going past the same place again, and he saw the fakir again, but this time the fakir didn't look like a fakir. He was looking quite well. He was wearing good clothes, he was looking healthy and clean and tidy. And in fact, he saw that he was stood outside a building and there was a long line of people, and it seemed that this fakir was feeding those people. Musa alayhi salatu wasalam came and said, "Fakir, what is this? The last time I came and I saw you, you were, your stomach was against your back. You were starving, you had nothing, your clothes are in tatters. Now you are healthy, mashallah. It's good to see that you are wearing good clothes and you are feeding yourself, but I see you are feeding others. What is this?" And the fakir said, "Oh Musa, alayhi salatu wasalam, when you made dua for me, Allah accepted your dua and gave me the wealth. What I did is spent all of that wealth in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I gave it all to the needy. What Allah did is He gave me 10 times more." He said, when Allah gave me that, I spent all of that in the way of Allah. Then Allah gave me more, according to His promises, 10 times, 700 times. He said, I spent all of that. He said, the more Allah gave me, the more I spent in His way. He said, to the point that you see before you now, I have set up this facility where I feed the poor. I give them place to stay. And I have plenty of money, and I have plenty of money to feed and give to others. Subhanallah. So the greatest way to get rich is to give. It's a hard thing to do, but if you grasp this concept in your hearts and minds, believe you me, it's one of the greatest achievements you will make in your life, and it will be one of those things which brings you closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at Sayyidina Usman Ghani radiyallahu an. What, apart from all the other factors, one of the greatest factors which gave him his status, why was he called Ghani? Because of what he gave in the path of Allah and His Rasul, in the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's a little bit about giving and why we should give and the farziyat of giving. Now, who should pay zakat? Okay. A person who owns wealth, and we're going to have to define what wealth is as well, by the way, but a person who owns wealth to nisab. What is nisab? Now, nisab can be calculated on gold, or it can be calculated on silver. Our ulama around the world, the Hanfi ulama, have calculated on silver. Why? Because it gives us a lower threshold to pay zakat. Okay? It means that we pay zakat earlier than we would do if we calculated it on gold. And the reason for that is that our ulama say that we should give sooner rather than later. So let's not wait till we've got more wealth. Wait till we've got a reasonable amount of wealth and then start to pay zakat. So the nisab is calculated on silver. It can, if somebody follows the principle of gold, that is acceptable. Okay? But we are basing this discussion on silver. And if you are following gold, you just have to base all of these principles on the nisab of gold. So what is the nisab of silver? First of all, how much zakat do you pay? You pay 2.5% of your wealth, 1/40th of the total amount of wealth. On all your wealth? No. On the wealth you have owned for 1 year or more. Okay, that's the first thing. When do you pay zakat? When you have wealth to the value of nisab. I've told you nisab based on silver. That is $52.5 of silver, which is approximately 612.36 grams, rounded off to 613 grams of silver. So you work out today's price of silver per gram. You can Google it, it's everywhere. And it's the same around the world. It doesn't matter which country you're in, it's just converted into your currency. You work out today's value of silver for 1 gram, you multiply it by 613 to get the resulting figure, and it's approximately in the sort of 280 GBP, British pounds mark, whatever that equates to in whatever currencies you follow from wherever you're watching in the world. But that's how so once you have achieved that wealth, so I'm just going to round it off to £300 for easy argument's sake. So £300, once you have achieved £300 of wealth, okay, then it becomes farz upon you to pay zakat. Okay, now how do you calculate your zakat? So the first thing is that zakat is payable on wealth which you have owned for 1 year. What is the definition of wealth? I'm not going to give you the textbook definitions of wealth, because if I have a book here which my Ustad Girami, Mufti Rafiq al-Hasni Saab, wrote. Okay, now you can see how thick that book is. Okay, that is a book on masail of zakat. So I'm not going to go through every single masla of zakat. I'm just going to give you enough, inshallah, information for you to practically complete your farz. So nisab, I've told you what it's based on. What is wealth? Okay, so how do you, what is included in the definition of wealth? Because this is important not only for your nisab, but when you come to calculate your zakat. What do you calculate zakat on? What is included in wealth? So for example, I'll tell you first what is not included in your wealth. What is not included in your wealth is your house, or in Urdu we say roti kapra makan, yeah? Or in English, your house, your food, and your clothing. In Shari terms, we say your hajat-e asli, your required necessary items for living. So a house to live in is necessary, okay? Clothes to live with are necessary. Food to live with, water, drink, etc. is necessary. Now, The ulama have also included in this definition of hajat asli, your required necessities for living, items like a ride. Okay, so if you have a motorbike, or you have a car, or you have a bicycle which you use for your main mode of transport, that is not included also in your wealth. That is included in your hajat asli. It's necessary for your day-to-day living in modern society, to get to work, etc., etc. Also, what is included in that is items of the household, such as your fridge freezer, such as your cooker, such as your microwave, such as your food processor, such as your coffee machine. So all of these are not included in your calculation of wealth. You exclude all of this, the house that you live in. So when it comes to the house that you live in, the first question I often get is, well, I have a mortgage on my house, but I have equity in my house. Do I pay, how do I calculate the zakat on my house? Well, you don't, because there is no zakat on the house that you live in. If you begin to talk about second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th houses, then there's a question to be answered with respect to how much zakat you have to pay on those. But the house that you live in, which is your primary residence, where you live in, there is no zakat for that. Likewise, your clothes. Now, the next issue here is, well, I have a house worth £50,000 and I have a house worth £1 million. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how much. I am wearing clothes, you know, I'm wearing a t-shirt from Primark, which I bought for £2, £3. I'm wearing a t-shirt, a Gucci t-shirt, which I paid £300 for. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about the value. You will not pay zakat on that. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, what do you pay zakat on? So what is included is your cash. Okay, so cash in terms of your income. I'm not talking about cash, paper cash in the palm of your hand, but money which comes into your account, and any cash money that you may have. Any stocks and shares, any investment funds that you may have. Okay, any high interest accounts that you've got money saved in. Okay, all of these stocks, shares, you know, currency trading on the stock market or currency markets, all of this, anything which is invested in that way is included as your wealth. Okay, Male tijarat, the trade goods. So if you're a shopkeeper, for example, let's say you're a jeweler, you've got a shop where you sell gold. The gold on the jewelry which is in your shop, even though it might be worth millions, is liable for zakat. That is included in your wealth for paying zakat. Okay, and then it doesn't really apply in Western countries, but farm animals and agricultural stock, that is also included in that. Again, I'm not going to go into that in detail today. Number one, time. Number two, it doesn't really apply to our living in the West, except for those people who are farmers and are in the industry. But we can have a separate conversation if anybody wants clarification on that. Gold and silver, that's a primary one. Gold and silver. Okay, you will pay zakat on any gold and silver. Any money you have lent out. So if somebody owes you money, okay, it's owed to you, then you need to pay the zakat because you are the owner, it belongs to you. Somebody else has borrowed it, but you are owner, you must pay zakat on it. Okay, then, and this is an interesting one, I had a question a few days ago from Australia regarding this. In the subcontinent, it's called a GP fund. In the UK, it's known as a pension. In Australia, it's known as a superannuation. Whatever the name you call it, the employment benefit where a person is employed and out of their wages an amount of money is deducted every month, which is saved to one side for them. That money is then, there's more money which is then put into that fund from the employer or the government. Okay, so that money from the government or the employer plus the money saved from that person's wages is put into a pot, and then the employed person, the person working, doesn't have immediate access to that money, but at some date in the future he has access to that money. Is zakat payable on your pension, on your GP fund, on your superannuation? The answer is yes, and I'm going to briefly talk about that for a minute here. That there's an argument where people say that there isn't zakat applicable to that? Why? They give two reasons. They say that there's not milk-e-ta'am, there's not complete ownership of that wealth, which is what one of the conditions of zakat are. As I told you, there's a huge book here full with masail. So we're not going to go through every single masla of zakat, but I'm going to gloss over certain things which we need to understand, and a lot of questions we face in the real world today as lay people. So some people will say, and you might hear someone say, oh no, you don't have to pay zakat on your superannuation or on your pension, because they will say the reason is ulama have said, or somebody else has said, that this money is, you don't have milk-e-ta'am, you don't have complete ownership. Why? You don't actually have it. Your employer takes it, it's kept by the pension company, or it's in a pot somewhere, and you're given it at the point you retire, or at some point in the future. So you don't have access to it now, therefore you don't have control over that money, therefore you don't actually have ownership over that money. Okay? That's one of the reasons that people cite, that they say therefore zakat isn't applicable to it. Okay? And then there's a couple of other technical reasons, but I'm not going to mention those. But so the point I'm making is you will find people who will say zakat isn't applicable on that. Well, for your information, Shah Ahmad Raza Khan Barilvi, Ala Hazrat Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh, he writes in his Fatawa Rizviyah that zakat is applicable. Alama Shami, according to Ibn Abidin, according to the big books of fiqh and the principles therein, zakat is applicable. Why? Because even though you might not have immediate access to that money, you have ownership of that money. Even though you don't have the right to access it and do what you want immediately, it's still yours. Nobody else can access it. It's your complete ownership. It's complete ownership, and therefore the ulama have said, those who understand these masail in their intricacies have said it is liable for zakat. So that is included. So your cash, your savings, money, stocks and shares, any other kind of investments. Property other than your house, which will fall under mal-e tijarat, goods of trade. And again, I need to clarify something here. So what I might as well do it while I've mentioned that. Question is, I have a house other than the one I live in, or I have 10 houses, 50 houses, flats. Do I pay zakat on them? Well, what you need to first understand is, did you at the time of buying those properties have the niyyah that I am buying this for trade? In other words, that I'm going to keep it. When the price goes up, I'm going to sell it for a profit. Whether that's 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, however long it is, I'm going to sell that property and I'm going to make a profit. If that was your niyyah, then you will pay zakat. You will pay zakat on the value of that property. Then the next question is, well, I don't own them outright, I have a mortgage. Then the answer to that question is, you will pay on the equity in the property that you own. If the property is worth 100,000, you have a mortgage for 70,000, you own 30,000, you will pay zakat on that 30,000 of that property. Okay. However, then a person says, I bought this house or these houses or this block of flats, I bought them, but I didn't buy them to sell. I bought them that I'm going to keep them, I'm going to put them on rent, I'm going to earn rental income. In that case, the value of the property, the equity you have, there's no zakat on that. But there is zakat on the rental income that you're earning and saving. So that will fall under money, under the category of money or cash. And how you deal with that, we'll talk about in a minute. Okay. Then there's another situation. A person says, I bought the properties with the intention to rent, but you know what, at some point in the future, if I get a good price, I'll sell it. In that case, there is no zakat on it as well. Okay, zakat is on goods for trade. It means that when you bought those goods, they were bought for the intention solely that I will sell them one day for a profit, whether that's immediately or future. If there was another niyat involved, or there was a dual niyat that when I'll make money by a rent, and if I get a good price, I'll sell it. there's a dual niyat there, and if there's a dual niyat, then there's no zakat. Okay. Now, money or any of these wealths, when do you pay? When is zakat payable? Number one, I said when the value reaches nisab, which I said approximately £300 or whatever the value of 613 or 612.36 grams to be exact of silver is. So you've got that much wealth. The next condition is you must have owned that wealth for a year or more. If you have owned the wealth less than a year, then you will not pay zakat on it. Okay, it's only liable for zakat after 1 year of ownership. So that's the other key thing that you have to remember here. So gold and jewelry and silver which you bought a year. For example, today is the 15th of Ramadan. And remember, the other thing to mention here is that a year is not based on the Gregorian calendar, on the Western calendar of January to December. It's based on the Islamic lunar calendar. So you must understand your lunar dates, okay? Because every year in the English calendar, the date will change. So for example, today is the 15th of Ramadan, it is the 9th of May. Next year, the 15th of Ramadan might be on the 29th of April, let's say, okay? So it's a different day in the English calendar. But if you calculate your zakat today on the 15th of Ramadan, 1441 Hijri 2020, then next year you will calculate your zakat on the 15th of Ramadan again, on 1442 Hijri next year, the year 2021, whatever date the English calendar that falls on. So it's based on the lunar calendar 1 year. Once you have had the wealth for 1 year, then you will pay zakat on it. Okay, so these are certain questions which I wanted to clarify on what do you pay your zakat on. Likewise, loan. Okay, the loan, before you gave the loan, it was part of the money in your bank, and when you gave the loan, it's gone to somebody else, but it's still your ownership. You will pay zakat. Now, what about money that's owed, that you owe? I've already given one example of a mortgage on a second, third, fourth property. What if somebody says, well, I owe money on credit cards, I owe money in a loan to the bank, I've got a secured loan, I've got an unsecured loan, I've got money outstanding on a credit card, I've got a personal loan to my neighbor, to my brother, to my sister. I owe them money. What you do is then you calculate. So now this is how you will calculate your zakat. You will list all your wealth. You will first list your cash, savings, etc. And on that point as well, let me mention that it's not your wages or your salary that count. It's money left after your expenses and everything you've spent. So, for example, a person could earn £500,000 a year, okay, £1 million a year, but his expenses, his lavish lifestyle is so much that he spends all of it. After a year, he has nothing left. Then he doesn't pay zakat if he's got nothing left. In fact, or it might be that his loans are so great that after he serviced everything and paid for his needs, he's got nothing left, even though he's a millionaire technically, or on the face of it. But he won't pay zakat, okay, because there's actually nothing left at the end to pay zakat on, unless he has gold and silver. So let me explain. Count your cash. How much cash do you have lying around, if you have any? Your balance in your bank account. Let's take today as an example, the 15th of Ramadan. Calculate all your cash, calculate all the money in your account, your savings, etc. Calculate your stocks and shares, the value of any investments, the current value. So if the value's gone up over the last week, today they're high, then there's high, you take the high value. If they've gone down, then you take the low value. Okay. Then you take any male tijarat, any stock for trade. So if you're a shopkeeper and you own stock in your shop outright, not anything on credit, but anything you own outright in the shop, okay, which you have had for a year or more, you will pay zakat on that. You need to add that to your list. Okay, I don't know if I've already said gold and silver, any value, and that's based on today's value, not last year's value. And by the way, gold's very expensive at the minute. It's, I think gone up by about 40-50%, or probably even more over the last year. But it's today's value. Okay, you will note that down. You will calculate how many grams, how many dollars of gold and silver do I have, and you will include that. Money lent out. Does anybody owe you money? If somebody owes you money, let's say £1,000, you will add that to it. And I'll give you an arbitrary example, hypothetical example, just to kind of bring this in terms of monies. You add that to your list. Then you factor in any of your pension fund, any superannuation that you own, add that to the list. Total it all up, that's your zakatable wealth. Next you need to do is, do I owe money? Yes, I owe X amount to a credit card, I owe X amount to a loan, I owe X amount of credit on that mali tijarat. I have £40,000 worth of stock in my shop, but in fact I only own 10,000 because 30,000 is on credit. Okay, so you then factor in all the loans that you owe out. They will be a negative. So let's say you've calculated all your wealth, you then subtract any money that you owe to the bank or any other individual, and then the resulting figure that you get, you will pay zakat on that figure, 2.5%. Another question here which comes in. I have diamonds, I have rubies, I have emeralds, I have precious stones. Do I pay zakat? According to the Ahnaf, you don't. The schools differ, by the way. For example, Ahnaf say you must pay zakat on jewelry, gold and silver, but not on precious stones. The Shafis say you don't pay even on gold and silver. So the schools do vary. So this, what I'm giving you, is the position of the Hanafi madhab. So there's no zakat on your precious stones. Only, so if you do have jewelry, gold or silver or platinum, and it has precious stones in there also, you won't pay for the value. You won't calculate the value of the stones. It's irrelevant, even if it's millions of pounds. Only the gold which houses those stones, the ring or the necklace, the chain in which those precious stones are set, you need to calculate the value of those and pay zakat on that. So that's simply, I've kind of given you an overview of how to calculate your zakat and what is included in your zakatable income. Now there might be something in your minds that you think, well, I earn this and I earn this. I've just covered the main categories which are common. There might be other categories that people think that, well, I have this or I have this. Is this zakatable or not? And you can ask if that's the case. So let me give you a working example. Okay, so a person. Okay, first let me clarify another thing. Income is not wealth, as I said before, because the income you earn, you spend it. As you earn it, you spend it. Okay, so anything you've spent, you haven't. So let me give an example. A person earns £25,000 a year. Okay, he spends £1,000 a year, a month on his. So let's say let's keep it simple. He earns £24,000 a year after tax. So he takes home £2,000 a month. Okay, his expenses are £1,000 a month after he's paid his mortgage and his bills and his food and his everything else, his clothing, etc., etc. He has £1,000 left. Okay, now let's say this is the first month this person's just graduated or just started working, and this is his salary. He had nothing, no wealth before this. He then earns £1,000. Now he has £1,000. He spent 1,000, but he still has 1,000. Okay, now he has that 1,000. He has the nisab. I told you nisab was what? Was 612.36 grams of silver, the value of around 250 to 300 pounds. He has more than this now, zakat. He is now in the category of the people who must give zakat. It's wajib upon him. Fine. Now, what he does is he earns this every month, but he doesn't need to pay zakat on it straight away. Why? Because he has not had it for a year. Now 12 months are up. He's been working for a year. We come to the 15th of Ramadan next year, let's say. Now, does he pay zakat? The answer is no, he doesn't. Even though he saved £1,000 a month, right, for 12 years, he doesn't. Why? Because it's only been, he was earning during the last year. So the only money he's liable for is money from the first month. It's only been 12 months from the day he started working. But he never received wages the day he started working. He received it at the end of the first month. So it's only been 11 months since his first wages. And then 10 months since his second wages, and 9 months since his third wages, and so on and so forth. So he doesn't need to pay zakat. When he starts to pay zakat is in the second year. So now he's been working for 2 years. His situation is the same. He spends £1,000 and he saves £1,000. At the end of the second year now, he has £24,000 saved, but because 12,000 in his first year of work, 12,000 in his second year of work, how does he calculate his zakat? What he must now do is look to the 15th of Ramadan last year and see what wealth he had. He will look and he will see, I had nothing else, I just had £12,000 in my account on the 15th of Ramadan last year, and therefore he pays his zakat on £12,000. Not on what he has in his account now, but what he had last year, because he has owned that for a year. Now, if the money has gone down, so last year he had £12,000, but then this year he's actually spent more. Even though he's been earning, he's been spending more, his expenses have gone up, he got married, whatever happened, his expenses went up. Now, this year when he looks into his account is actually £10,000, not £12,000. He's eaten into the savings from last year. And then he will only pay zakat on the £10,000. Okay, so what I say is in your first year of earning, any money you have accumulated, you won't pay zakat on. You will pay zakat from your second year of earning. And then you will calculate it 1 year historically. So, for those paying zakat today, or calculating the zakat today, you will look at the wealth you owned in the 15th of Ramadan, 2019, or 1440 Hijri, last year. You will calculate based on all of those things I have said. You will list everything down, take into account all your loans, and then you will subtract any thing that you owe to anybody. The balance figure, you will pay zakat 2.5%. So I'll give you a working example. So a person has today wants to calculate their zakat. They look to the 15th of Ramadan, and whatever the situation, you have to go and work out what day was the 15th of Ramadan in Gregorian calendar last year. So 15th of Ramadan last year, a person says, well, I had £10,000 in my account. Okay, so that's £10,000. Then say stocks. Well, no, I don't invest in stocks and shares, so I never had anything. Fine. Property. He says, yeah, I do have a property. It's rented out, but I didn't buy it with the intention of selling it. Okay, so you say, fine. Do you receive rental income? The man says, yes, I do receive rental income. Where's that money? He says, well, it's in that £10,000. You know, it goes into my account, so it's included in that money. Fine, no problem. Don't need to think. Do you have any goods for trade? The man says, no, I don't. I don't have a shop. I work in the service industry. Do you have any farm animals, agriculture? No, I don't. Have you loaned anyone any money? The person says, yes, I lent my friend £1,000 and he still owes me. Say, right, so you add £1,000 to that. Okay? Loan. Then, do you have a superannuation, a pension? He says, yes, it is. Legally, I had to have a pension. The value of that on the 15th of Ramadan last year was £3,000. So, you add on £3,000 to that. Then I ask him, do you owe any money? He says, yes. So first of all, let's calculate this. Then I said to him, do you have any gold and silver? He says, no. I have a gold watch. And by the way, you're going to say, well, gold watch is haram for a man. Well, it's haram if the face and the watch itself can be gold, cannot be gold. The strap can be gold. Why? Because that's bit taba. I'm not going to go into that. On another day we'll talk about that. So he says, I've got a, let's say silver's halal, keep it simple. I've got a silver watch. Is that included? Well, the silver watch isn't, the silver is included in your, by the way, on that point, a person can have a watch worth £1 million, even if it's not, if it's gold or silver, that's counted. If it's not gold or silver, then it doesn't matter, it's not counted. So only gold and silver is countable in terms of zakat. So he says, well, I've got a watch. Does that count? Say, yes, it does. So he says, okay, I've got 20 grams of silver in my watch, and it's worth £50, let's say, right? So let's add £50 to that. So he says, so then we say to him, do you have anything else? He says, no, I don't. So we add that up. £10,000 he had in his account saved up. £1,000 is owed to him from a loan. Then £3,000 from his pension, plus £50, which is the value of his silver on his watch. That leaves us to be £14,050. Okay? The zakatable wealth. Then he says, we ask him, do you owe money to anybody? He says, yes, I owe £500 on my credit card. So we say, right, minus £500 on your credit card. Then he says, I took a personal loan for £5,000. So you say, okay, that's another £5,000 there. Do you have any other loans outstanding which you owe? He says no. So you say, right, the total owns is £5,000 from your loan plus £500 from your credit card. That's £500,500. That man's zakatable income was 14,050. Okay, we subtract what he owes, which was 5,500. Okay, 5,500. Then that leaves us with 8,450. So his taxable income or taxable wealth in terms of zakatable wealth is £8,450. So he will pay 2.5% of 2.5% of £8,450, which is about £211.50. Okay, so that's the amount of zakat on the resulting £8,450 of wealth that person owes. So I've given you a simple calculation there to illustrate how you would work out your zakat. So at the minute, if anybody has any questions, please throw them in, because I'm almost finished in terms of what some of the masail that I wanted to present. I'm just having a look to see if there's any questions. Okay, so let me move on then. So I've given you a working example of how to work out your zakat. If there's anything in particular, you can always message me, get hold of me afterwards, and I'll do my best to help you out. Okay, now, what about who do I pay my zakat to? Okay, I know how much I owe. I know how much I've worked it out. I've sat down with somebody and I've gone through it. Do I give it to charities? Do I give it to anyone else? Look, and this is something which is very important. Who is eligible? Who in Sharia can receive zakat? And this is very important. That person must be a faqir. And the second thing is that they must have ownership. So, dealing with the first thing, faqir. Who is a faqir? A faqir is a person who does not have the wealth of nisab. I've told you nisab was 613 grams of silver, the value of. In today's money, it's about 250 to 300,000 pounds, 300 pounds. It's about 60,000 rupees in Pakistani rupees. It's not a lot of money. If a person has 300 pounds, or more, 400 pounds, they've surpassed the nisab, but they can't receive zakat. A person has a 100,000 rupees, they cannot receive zakat even though they're still poor. But you cannot give them, and you know, that could be the price of gold now, just even one small bangle of gold, a person will have reached nisab. So you cannot, that person cannot receive zakat. A lot of us say we send the money to our friends and relatives back home who are gharib, who are poor. But even though they're poor, are they in this category of fakir? I'm sure they have a bit of silver or gold somewhere. If that's the case, they cannot receive your zakat. Don't give it to them. Give them sadaqah lillah, help them out, yes, but you cannot give them your zakat. If you do, your zakat has not been paid, and you will be challenged on the day of judgment, that you will be asked, you didn't pay your zakat. You say, Ya Allah, I did pay my zakat. I gave so-and-so every year to all my friends and relatives. Allah will say, well, did you ever check that are they eligible to receive your zakat? You'll say, Ya Allah, I assumed. Allah will say, that's not good enough. You must do your due diligence, as I always call it. You know, when it comes to matters of the dunya, we do our due diligence, but when it comes to matters of deen, we don't care, we just give. No, do your due diligence. So as far as charities are concerned, the problem I have, and I'm openly saying this, that I have a problem with charities. Not all charities, but if I don't know a charity, the problem is this. From a fiqh perspective, from Islamic law, there's two things that, well, the main thing is that the money must be owned by the fakir. So the person who is receiving zakat, they must take ownership of that money. What a lot of charities do is they don't give ownership of the money to the poor. They take the money, they transfer that money and translate it into assistance. Money, not money, food, shelter, etc. And then they give that assistance to the poor. That does not complete your zakat. Assistance is not zakat. Zakat is where the person is given ownership of your wealth. And so you pay, and you might pay it in money. It might not be money. You might pay in gold or silver. So some people say to me, I've got £1 million worth of gold, but I don't have the cash to pay the zakat on it. So the answer to that is, take the value of gold, which amounts to your zakat, out and give that. But you must give that as zakat and give it so that a fakir owns it, takes ownership of it. Now, most of us don't give it directly to a fakir. We give it to somebody who takes amana of that, and then his responsibility to dispense that to a fakir. But what a lot of these charities do is they provide assistance. They'll buy things in with that money, and then they will provide that assistance. That doesn't fulfill your zakat. The second issue I have, another example, is what people have started to do is charities, large charities, and I've seen this in Pakistan, that what they do is they say, give us your zakat. What we will do is we will buy a rickshaw for a poor person. So we're not just paying him his zakat. What we're doing is we're giving him the ability to now earn for himself. And so what these charities do is, with our zakat money that we give them, they'll buy rickshaws, they'll buy various things like that. They'll give it to the poor, the needy, who are gharib, who are entitled to zakat, and they will say, here, take this rickshaw, you start earning. Become a rickshaw driver, start earning, and then what they do is they're given a time frame, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. After that period of time, they have to return the rickshaw back, but it's given them an opportunity to earn an income and to build something for themselves. That does not fulfill your zakat. And it's quite strange actually, because some people have this concept, oh wow, look at that charity. They're not just helping the poor, they're providing them with the ability and the facility to earn. They're giving them a rickshaw, they're giving them, something else. No, that doesn't fulfill your zakat. It doesn't do your due diligence. Make sure the best places, if you want to give it to charities for your money, are madaris. Okay, or the Islamic institutions where you have poor people who are students, young children. The madrasa which I'm affiliated to, the madrasa Madinatul Ulum of my Ustad Girami Qibla Mufti Rafiq al-Hasni Zida Majduhu. You know, if you go, and I wish now it came to my mind that I could bring pictures to show you, that you have 6-7-year-old little girls who don't have shoes on their feet. They don't have, their parents have died and they've been given to their uncles and their aunties. Their aunties and uncles have brought the girls and boys to the madrasa and said, we don't have the income to feed ourselves and our own children. Never mind our brothers, our sisters' children who have passed away. Please take these children. They are given accommodation. They are given clothing. They are given food. They are educated. All day, Qala Allah, Qala Rasul. Reciting and memorizing the Quran, Hadith, Ilm Deen. That's what these people do. Give to a reliable madrasa. Okay? But again I say reliable because unfortunately, and again I say this openly, there's a lot of people that collect in the name of a madrasa but it never reaches the madrasa. Look at their houses back in Pakistan and wherever, and they've got these huge houses. Where did you earn the money from? You know? Anyway, it does happen, and as cynical as it might seem, it is. That's why I'm saying be responsible when you give your zakat. Don't just give it to the first person who asks for it. Okay, be very careful. But and another reason why I say that madaris are a brilliant place to give your money. I want to present this beautiful narration today to you. There's a sheikh in Damascus, and he was narrating to a group of students. And he gave this waqia. He said that a few years ago, he said there was a man in a qabristan in Damascus who was digging a grave. He was a grave digger. His job was to dig graves. This woman came to him, very solemn and upset, and said to him, one of my relatives had died, please prepare a grave for me. The man dug a grave, got ready, the janazah came. The woman was there with them. The janazah came, they brought the body, they lowered the body into the grave, and the grave digger said, I entered inside the grave to set the mayyat down and to prepare the grave inside. And he said, I saw that the grave just opened out in front of me. And he said, I saw like it was a beautiful garden of Jannah. He said, I physically saw this with my own eyes in the grave. He said, when I saw this, I fainted. He said, I fainted, and by the time I regained consciousness, he goes, I came out, we finished the burial, etc. He said, I looked around for the woman had gone. He said, people watching said to me, what happened to you? He said, I described what happened to me. He said, I couldn't sustain the vision I saw and I fainted. And they dismissed it, thought maybe, you know, something wrong with him or whatever. Anyway, they dismissed it, they went. Some months later, the same woman came to the qabristan again and said to the man, oh grave digger, I need you to dig me another grave. And he said, okay, fine. He dug the grave. A few hours later, the janazah came again. They buried the janazah. When the grave digger went into the qabr again, he saw again that it expanded, and it was a huge garden of Jannah. This time he didn't lose his consciousness. He quickly came out of the qabr, he finished the burial, and he ran towards the woman before she could leave. He got hold of the woman and he said, oh lady, I have a question for you. She said, leave me to my sorrow. Leave me to my sorrow. He said, please, I must ask you this, give me a few minutes of your time. She says, my son, I've just buried my son with my own hands and you want to ask me questions? And then he said, listen to me. And he described that this so-and-so, such and such happened to me. When you brought your first mayyat here, when you came to me, I buried it. When I was in the qabr, I saw it expanded into a garden of Jannah. The mayyat that we just buried now, you are saying is your son. When I buried it, I saw with my own eyes that the qabr had become a garden of Jannah. Who are these people? She said, both of them were my sons. And he was stunned. And he said to the old lady, he said, woman, lady, Amaji, what did your sons do that they achieved this status? And she said, not a great deal. All I know is one of them, who I buried first, was my younger son. He was a student of deen. He was studying to become an alim deen. And she said, the second one, he was working, but paying for him to study the ilm of deen. You know that man, the grave digger? He dropped everything. He dropped his shovels, he dropped everything, and he ran to the madrasa in Damashq. And he went to the sheikh and he said, "Sheikh, enroll me into your madrasa. I want to learn the ilm of deen." And he said, "What's wrong with you? You're 45, 50 years old and you're coming to me to learn now?" He said, and then he described everything that happened. And the sheikh nodded his head. He said, "Now I understand why you have come to me." That man who was the grave digger became one of the greatest alims in all, and this is modern now, not hundreds of years ago. He is one of the greatest sheikhs in the whole of Damascus and Syria at the minute. But the point I'm making in relation to your zakat is the person who pays for a student of deen in a madrasa, the ajr he will get is that Allah expands his qabr to become a garden of Jannah. And you, twofold, you are receiving the reward for your zakat of completing your farz. Secondly, Allah is elevating your status because you are paying for the students of deen. Those people, Subah Sham, Qala Allah, Qala Rasul. Allah and His Rasul's name is on their tongue. So bear these things in mind when you give your zakat. Be very responsible. Don't just give your zakat without responsibility. And I think, okay, here's a question here from Saima Irshad. Is zakat payable on a pension? I have just, there are different opinions. I've actually just gone through that in some discussion, so you can look back at this post, inshallah, and you can watch what I have said. I have given references, authentic references, which say that zakat is payable, and I've also talked about the reasons briefly why people say it's not payable. But my opinion and the more authentic opinion is that it is payable. Okay, do you include mortgage in that? No, well, you include mortgage. The way I said in terms of mortgages, in terms of the house that you live in, there's no issue of mortgage. Whether there's a mortgage or not, you don't pay zakat on the value of your house. Whether it's £1 million or whether it's £100,000, you don't pay zakat. The issue will arise on multiple properties. And I've said there it will only arise also if you have bought those properties with the intention of selling them. They then fall under the goods of trade, and then you will pay zakat. In that situation, if you have a house, keeping it simple, which you bought, that I'm going to sell it for a profit when the property prices go up, okay, you will pay zakat on the equity you own. So let's say it's £100,000, the value of the house. You bought it with £70,000 mortgage. You own £30,000. You will pay zakat on the £30,000 of that house. Now what you have done is, until it sells, you've put it on rent. So you're receiving rental income, and you own the value of the house. Then zakat will be payable on any rental income which you have saved for a year or more, and the equity which you own minus the mortgage of the value of the house. If you bought it simply to rent out, then there's no zakat on the value of the house, irrespective of mortgage, only on the rental income. In the same way, taxis, people buy taxis and sell them on, and rent them out. The value of the taxi, even though it, although it depreciates over time anyway, you don't pay zakat on the value of the taxi. You will pay on the rent that you receive as income from that. Just having a look to see if there's any other questions. Let me have a look. So it says here, what if you pay more than 2.5%? For example, your zakat is £200, but you pay 250. Would that £50 be sadaqah? So the recommendation is always pay a little bit more. Okay, always pay a little bit more. You will give it as the niyyah of zakat, but whatever Allah accepts it as a sadaqah, as zakat, or whatever, your niyyah will be that I am paying this as zakat, to be on the safe side. Always pay a little bit more. And this, in the masail, when it's written, it's written that when you calculate it, if you can, rather than 2.5%, calculate 2.75, calculate 3%, so that you're on the safe side. But even if you can't, 2.5% would suffice. Using my mother as an example, if she has 20 tola gold, we then need to find the worth of that gold based on today's rate and then pay zakat on that figure. Correct. It's not what it was worth 20 years ago when she bought the gold, or 5 years ago, or last year. No, it's on the value today. The value of gold, you weigh, you work out the weight, whether you have a record of the weight, or from the receipts you can work out, or take the gold out. I've seen people taking the gold out of their lockers, putting it on scales, or taking it to the jewelers, having it weighed, then working out the value that way, and then paying the zakat on that. But it's today's value, or the day of whenever you're calculating zakat, that is when it's payable. If you have a business that doesn't have stock, but you provide a service, you therefore have a business reserve. Do you pay zakat on that reserve fund? No, because that reserve, it depends where that reserves come from. So in a business where you're providing a service, you're earning from the service that you're providing. Okay, let's say a financial advisor, for example. You know, okay, no, that's not quite any service. You're a service provider. You're not selling goods, but you're providing a service, and you're getting paid for your time and your expertise in the service that you're providing. The reserve that you have, that is being questioned about here, I don't have goods, but I have a reserve. Where did that reserve come from? Is it the income that you earned from your job, from your work, from the service that you're providing? Or has the money come from somewhere else? Is it a loan from the bank? So, in answer to the question, if the money, the reserve, has been built up from the income that you have been earning, you've been getting paid for your service, you've been banking that money in the business account, and therefore that has built a reserve, then you will pay zakat on that, because that's your income. So any reserve you've had for a year or more in your bank account, minus any bills, blah, 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 all the expenses, taking everything out, whatever your reserve is, then you will pay zakat on that, because that's your income. That's what you have drawn. That is what is, not what you have drawn, but that is the income which you have earned from that, and therefore zakat will be payable on that. Okay? But there's another question there that I've just thought of. If the business is a limited company, and then the limited company owns the reserve and not the individual draws a salary. In that case, then the individual doesn't pay zakat on the reserve owned by the company, but he will pay it on his own income, personal income he draws from that. So what you have to distinguish there is money owned by the company and money owned by yourself. Zakat isn't payable on the money, it's payable on the goods of trade. I hope that answers the questions. I'm just going to have a look to see if there's any other questions floating about. Is zakat payable on digital currency like Bitcoin? Well, there's a whole debate on the hurmat or hillat of Bitcoin, but yes, I've already said any investments, if you've had them for a year or more, you will pay zakat on those investments. So yes, you will pay any on digital currency. Do you give zakat on a buy-to-let property but not planning to sell it? No, you don't. So if you have a buy-to-let property, you're not planning to sell it, even if you thought, well, I might sell it in the future for a profit, it's still not, you don't still pay zakat on it, because there's a dual niyat. I've explained this earlier, that you have a niyat that I might sell it, or I'm going to rent it. If I earn a good profit one day, I'll sell it. You don't pay zakat on the value or the equity of the property. You will pay zakat on what? On the rental income which you have had for a year or more. That will be treated like any other income. Does a husband pay zakat for his wife? Now actually, let me cover this one quickly. Does a husband pay zakat for his wife on her behalf? Is she not liable herself? can't see the rest of that question. Anyway, so a husband can pay on behalf of his wife. But if he chooses, if he says, no, it's not my responsibility. And remember one thing I've said to you before, a person can be earning millions but not be eligible to pay zakat because he had nothing tangible asset, no wealth at the end of it to pay, which is zakatable. But his wife, you know, she's got the gold and the silver, she's going to have to pay. Well, it's her responsibility, but if the husband agrees, I'll pay it on her behalf, then that's acceptable, the zakat is paid. If the husband doesn't agree, he says, I can't afford to pay your zakat, pay it yourself, then it's her responsibility. Ultimately, she will be liable. A person, by the way, who hasn't paid the zakat, it's a debt upon them. Okay, it's a debt. So you need to calculate your zakat and you need to dispense with its payment as soon as possible. Otherwise, if you die, then you will be questioned. Okay, so it will be a debt. Now, another question, can parents give zakat to their children? Or can children give zakat to their parents? No. You cannot give upwards or downwards in your lineage directly to your parents, grandparents upwards, to your children and their children downwards. Up and down you can't give money. But other than that you can. When you go sideways to uncles and aunties, nephews and nieces, you can, as long as they are eligible, as I explained, in terms of they have less than nisab. Now another situation here, a father is ghani. Okay, he has money, he's not eligible for zakat, but he's kanjus. Okay, can you give money to his wife? He doesn't pay to his wife, he doesn't pay his children. Can you give zakat to his wife and children? If the wife, if you can to the wife, but the children, if the children are under the age of puberty, na balig, then you cannot give them the zakat because the father is responsible for them. The father is ghani, he's rich, and therefore you can't give it to the children. If the children are above the age of puberty, then you can give them zakat. Okay, orphans and people like that, poor children who are under the age, who don't have any or those children whose parents are poor and fakir, you can give them zakat. Does a husband pay zakat for his wife? I've answered that. Is investment in digital currency something which is halal or haram? I'm not going to answer that question here. Trust me, that's a whole minefield in itself. Maybe, inshallah, that's a good session to have. Digital currencies and the hillat and hurmat of that. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll talk about that on another occasion. Okay, I think we better finish there because it's iftar time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this hazri, may he illuminate our hearts and minds. And I want to finish with the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh, who says that one majlis of fiqh, the understanding of deen, is greater than 60,000 years of worship. Subhanallah, we have just had a majlis of fiqh where we have been understanding Allah's deen and the masail of zakat. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept my hazri, may he accept your hazri, may he illuminate our hearts and minds, may he bring us closer in our love for his mahbub alayhi salatu wasalam. May he ease the situation of the ummah during these difficult times. May he give izzah to the Muslims of Kashmir, to the Muslims of Palestine, and may he alleviate our problems and issues. Allahumma inni laka sumtu wa bika amantu wa alayka tawakkaltu wa ala rizqika aftartu. या रब्बल आलमीन, इस हाजिरी को कबूल और मंजूर फरमा, हमारे रोज़े के सदक़े से हमारे कबीरा सगीरा गुनाह मुआफ़ फरमा, हमारी मुश्किलात आसान फरमा, हमारी बीमारियों को शिफा में तब्दील फरमा। या रब्बल आलमीन, हमें ऐसी ज़िंदगी बसर करने की तौफ़ीक़ अता फरमा जिससे तू और तेरा महबूब राज़ी रहें। सल्लल्लाहु अला हबीबिही मुहम्मद व आलिहि व अस्हाबी अजमाइन बिरहमतिका या अरहमर राहिमीन।
I had to think.